If we could get everybody to sit down and let's get started for our second half. We have a great lineup of folks who are going to be featured at the festival tomorrow. I would like to bring up 4 guests that are going to be featured at Words tomorrow. These are an esteemed group of individuals from all walks and all forms of the word. I'd like to bring to the stage James Bartleman, Mark Kingwell, Joan Barfoot, and Jeremy Dodds. So in some ways, what I'd like to do is give you a sense of who you can come and see tomorrow at the Words Literary Festival, our first inaugural festival. We have 4 great guests this afternoon. Let me introduce very quickly, and we'll get started quickly. And after we're done with our panel, I would invite everybody to come and to get your books signed and to mingle with our authors downstairs in the center gallery. You can get another drink. We've got a bar set up. We can continue the great conversation. So our first individual on our panel this evening is James Bartleman. Before taking on his role as the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, Jim Bartleman served 35 years in Canada's Foreign Service as ambassador to Cuba, Israel, NATO, and the European Union. He also served as High Commissioner to South Africa and Australia and was Foreign and Defense Policy Advisor to the Prime Minister. He's just about to publish his 3rd novel, Exceptional Circumstances, and will be speaking tomorrow afternoon at 4:30 p.m. here in Museum London, and his title is The Aboriginal Canadian as Outsider. Our second speaker on the panel is Joan Barfoot. Joan Barfoot is one of London's brightest literary lights, is the author of 11 novels, a journalist for several newspapers across the province of Ontario, including our London Free Press, a Western graduate, and was recently conferred an honorary Doctor of Literature in recognition of her contributions to the cultural and literary landscape of Canada. She will be reading tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. with Guy Vanderhaeg, who you just heard from, in the lecture theater, and that promises to be an excellent session. Jeremy Dodds. Jeremy Dodds is an award-winning translator. Oh, I got him out of order. Oh my goodness, this is the skip. We'll go out of order. Sounds good? Jeremy Dodds is an award-winning poet, translator, and contributing poetry editor at Coach House Books. If you can believe it, he drove to London from New Brunswick, where he is the writer-in-residence at the University of New Brunswick. A road warrior. We're incredibly grateful for your clear passion for the Canadian landscape out the window of your car. Jeremy will be in conversation tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. here in Museum London with local poet and musician Andy Maguire. Last but certainly not least, and out of order, we have Professor Mark Kingwell, is a philosopher, editor, critic, and prolific writer based at the University of Toronto's Department of Philosophy, with books and essays on a range of topics like civility and citizenship, justice and democracy, luck and happiness, architecture, cities and public spaces, aesthetics, procrastination, professional sports, and trout fishing. On Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m., Professor Kingwell will be here to give a lecture with a wonderful title, You Must Change Your Life, Beauty, Desire, and Happiness. One of our driving motivations to begin a literary and creative arts festival in London, Ontario, arose from the desire to recognize London's sometimes hidden status as a crucible for outstanding innovators and thinkers, whether they're writing or arriving or departing from the city to pursue their talents. Let's think of some of the innovators that have come from this city. One can think of the co-discoverer of insulin, Frederick Banting, and was a visual artist himself, quite renowned, and knew quite a few of the visual artists in Canada, including a group of 7 painters. Jack Warner, co-founder of Warner Brothers Studios, not something a lot of people know that Jack Warner was born here in London, Ontario. Poet and playwright James Rainey, bandleader Guy Lombardo, filmmaker and painter Jack Chambers, and dancer Evelyn Hart. Television writers Paul Haggis and David Shore, environmentalist David Suzuki, actors Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling, poet and musician Shad. And of course, Joan Barfoot and James Bartleman, who have done their undergraduate degrees here at Western. Yes, indeed, a clap for the talent that's come from Western, or from London and Western. You thought I was going to put Justin Bieber in that list, didn't you? As you know, one of Western's former students and writers in residence recently won a big, big award. Of course, I'm speaking about author Alice Munro, who won the Nobel Prize at this time last year. Alice Munro's win proved to the world something Canadians already knew. CanLit is world-class and has been for some time. In honor of that celebration and that big win, Western has set up a chair of creativity in her name to celebrate our creative culture and to advance the study of creativity. As thinkers and writers on our panel, I wanted to begin by putting them all on the spot to look into their creativity. And I'd like to ask them, as individuals that have devoted a significant portion of your lives to the study, to the activity, to the manifestation of creativity in all forms, how do you view creativity? How do you nurture creativity? Why is it important for us now? Anybody want to start us off? Putting them on the spot.
I'll start. Who knows? Is it working? Then I won't start.
Try it again.
Yeah?
There you go.
No? Yeah? Okay. I don't know why I volunteered to start. That was stupid. I think that in my world, creativity has a huge definition. I do what I do, and we all do what we do, which, involves typing fast and slow, thinking fast and slow, feeling fast and slow. But it seems to me that almost everybody, given an opportunity, has a field of creativity that they can launch into. My mother was a gardener, and I am so not a gardener, but she every year studied seed catalogs in the winter, and she planted the most beautiful gardens, and that was her art, I think. I didn't think of it at the time. What I thought at the time was, why can't I throw my ball into her stupid petunias? But that was the way she expressed beauty, and I think probably most people, everybody probably, given an opportunity, would like a way to create beauty and to probably create something that hasn't existed before, that you make something that if you didn't make it, nobody would. Sometimes that's not entirely a good thing, and sometimes it's a good thing not to make something, but we all, I think, have some sense that there's a hole in the universe that only we could fill, and whatever form we choose, maybe it's quilting or gardening, or it's writing books, or it's writing poems, but it's a way to fill a little hole in the universe that only we do.
Great, yeah.
I started late in writing. I retired as a Foreign Service officer, retired as Lieutenant Governor, and I turned to writing. And I think I did that for two reasons. One, especially when I started to write novels, not so much in the nonfiction side. I was 66, 67, I'm now 75. And, I look at, this is a philosophical answer, I guess, look at how much time have I got left on Earth, and how do I want to spend it? I'm an agnostic. I have no expectation that there is I'm going to go to heaven or to hell, thank goodness. So I want to spend those last years really living. And for me, really living is to have a heightened sense of consciousness. And what I found when I started to write novels was that I was living at a level, a deeper experience of the beauty of the world, than I would have in any other way. My wife said, why don't you go and volunteer at the food bank? Well, I suppose you could have another level of consciousness there, friendship, helping, and all the rest, but I'd rather have some classical music on and to really live more deeply, being aware of mortality coming. At the same time, I had a few causes that I wanted to deal with, issues that I wanted to deal with. And so I focused on social justice novels, the condition of Native people. And so my creativity had a pragmatic end to it. Thank you.
You go? Okay, I'll go. Philosophy is about solving problems, I think. And the most basic problems of all are the ones that we cherish the most. Solutions to deep problems are very difficult to come by, and I think that's where creativity comes into it. So on the one hand, there's a kind of logic issue. Can I get to the solution in fewer moves than any other solution I've seen so far? That's what we call elegance. This is where technical ability meets aesthetics in logic and argument. And that's not inconsiderable. It's not just a strange thing that we call better solutions more elegant. They are more beautiful. So when I think about creativity in what I do, it's about how to solve problems better than they have been solved so far. And if they can't be solved, to show why they can't be solved better than anyone else has shown that they can't be solved.
I think I try not to think of creativity too often because I don't want to jinx anything, and I'm trying to protect my future creative self. There's this great Chuck Close quote. So my take on creativity is maybe a little negative, but Chuck Close says, you know, inspiration is for amateurs. And there's something that I love about that because, you know, you get up every day and you have to work on a poem or you're writing a piece of fiction, and you can't wait. You have deadlines. You can't wait for this so-called inspiration to come into play. And so my relationship with creativity is fraught in that anytime I find myself getting into a routine, if I'm writing in the morning, I'm like, okay, I've done that for a week. I got to start writing in the afternoon. So I'm always kind of trying to shift things up just to see what happens. It just feels like an experiment all the time to me. You know, what sort of avenues of creativity can I access if I do this, if I work in a coffee shop, if I read so-and-so and then write a paragraph about what I just read. So it's a constant flux for me. And I find what it has taught me over the years is that I'm going to be able to create or work on what I'm working on under any kind of sky, anywhere. And it's maybe given me some confidence doing that. So, yeah.
James, you mentioned that social justice has been something that you've put at the center of your writing, as well as Canadian values and the way that we reflect on Canada. And I'm thinking of your new novel, Exceptional Circumstances, is set in the FLQ crisis. Now, this is something that you had a personal experience and firsthand experience in your public life, in the sense that you were, you're going to have to correct me on the exact title, but international terror advisor to the federal government at the time. And it strikes me that these are themes in this novel that are coming up, like torture, national security, citizenship, and human rights. Themes that really resonate with Canadians right now. In light of recent events like Ottawa and Quebec this week, though it's very, very soon to make comments on, and our potential involvement in the Middle East, I'm wondering how Canada's conception of itself has changed since those 1970s. How have we changed as a country in the way that we view ourselves?
In 1970, I was the so-called expert on international terrorism in the Intelligence Bureau of Foreign Affairs. And when the crisis occurred I was the member of the task force that managed it, and I provided the assessments. And what really struck me was the fact that here was a crisis which really was not something like 9/11. There were about 50 men and women running around Quebec, putting bombs in mailboxes, and they kidnapped a couple of people, and the whole province of Quebec shut down pretty well, and the federal government declared the War Measures Act. They removed habeas corpus, they brought the military in, but I knew, because I was in the intelligence side, working with the RCMP Security Service and the others, that there were only 50 of these guys. They weren't thousands of them running around. And I thought that was an abuse of power. It's something that made me think of, my previous posting had been in Colombia. There you went through the streets and people with machine guns and beating up people and all the rest of it. I said, is this the way our country is going to go? So that was something in the back of my mind. And then, years later, that idea came to fruition to do something about it, because I'd started to write. And I was really upset at the fact that in 2010, the Minister of Public Safety of Canada sent a directive to the head of CSIS authorizing CSIS to use information received by torture in its operations, and instructions to the RCMP, to the interceptor organizations and all the rest, to tell them using information derived to torture is okay. As a matter of fact, if there's a crisis and you don't use it, then you're not doing your job. And I thought that was really a slippery slope to a different type of country. I thought that was moving the scale from a balance between human rights and national security, too much in the way of national security. And what sort of country are we going to have if we are tolerating torture? If we are, in a sense, almost encouraging countries to torture their prisoners so that they can give us information? It was a bridge too far. And so I wanted to write something. And I think that you can make speeches, you can write letters to the editor, and all the rest of it, and they just really don't have much impact at all. It's been my view that literature can change ideas and change minds. And that's why I thought, I will write a novel which on one level is just a spy, counterterrorism, terrorism, novel, romance, all the rest, which will interest people at that level if they don't want to go any further. But at the same time, investigate the whole issue of the balance between civil liberties and national security, the whole issue of what does torture really do to the victim? What does torture do to the perpetuator of torture? And get into all those fundamental ethical issues. And so I wrote this book called Exceptional Circumstances, which is coming out in the spring, but which is available on Amazon, all proceeds to Amnesty Canada, and Amnesty is supporting it very much. And so that is what I'm doing. And I did the same with books on residential schools and native loss of land and things like that, to try and have readers get into the shoes or the moccasins of Native people and understand the world from their perspective. I wanted people in the exceptional circumstances to get into the shoes of one of the prosecutors in the case, and the victim in a case, and a terrorist in the case, and then make up their own mind.
That's great. And one of the things that you pointed out is the way in which words have that power to change the world. And in some ways, that can be an ambivalent way in which words work. And I'm thinking of the the convocation address that Joan Barfoot gave recently in 2012. And I'm going to quote something that you said at that convocation address. You said, "We have to keep alert to slithering mutations of words and be always questioning the sly, deliberate misuses of propagandas, institutions, politicians, all the various individuals and agencies intent on sliding us without our noticing toward their points of view." You also highlight the power of words to express dissent with things as they are. I'm wondering if you could expand a little further upon this point. How have words been a vehicle or a form of empowerment for you to dissent as a writer?
Oh, I'm not sure. Whether using words or not, I'm basically a contrarian, so that's just part of the toolbox. It's being sort of basically anti-authoritarian. Okay, how's that? Any better? No? Still not working. Let's try. That's a little more. Is that better? Okay. I think when I was talking, well, I know what I was talking about in that convocation address was my alarm at really how language has been mutated by political causes, with which, of course, I disagree, or else I wouldn't be alarmed. But we can see in, say, the municipal elections or provincial or federal elections that there is a difference between the ringing tones of the taxpayers versus the more civilized, to me, noun of citizen. And what people call themselves and call each other actually matters, because if you think of yourself as a taxpayer, then I'm guessing you're grumpy and you're writing in the comments section under news stories, and you're probably voting for a real Dumbo. Whereas if you consider yourself a citizen, you have a sense of collective responsibility to each other. That's just one example, but I think that sort of thing matters. Now, as a woman, I've been offended for several decades now by the language that has stolen the concept of right to life, for instance, because that has taken on a kind of, well, immediately had a code meaning that if you break down those words, it does not have. So I'm really particular about words. My own writing students, who are perhaps not as adept at guys or as far along, find me really, really precise about whether they are using the words they actually mean to use and whether they are the appropriate language for a situation. Our politics are embedded with bad language, and I would like to correct that. I don't seem to be doing very well at it.
Thank you so much. This is actually a question that's really at the heart of Mark Kingwell's work as well, is the question of civility and how political discourse operates in our contemporary Canadian life. And one of the things that I thought was really fascinating in a recent article that you wrote on The Public Intellectual is that you made the point that if the philosopher is not necessarily the one to rule, as Socrates might have thought, it is his or her job not to be too cynical, to have critical thought give us hope in some way. How does a public philosopher or a public intellectual, whichever term that you might feel more comfortable with, how do we offer rigorous social criticism without weaponizing critique, without turning it into something that becomes a weapon that would disengage a broader public in a dialogue like politics? How do we encourage civility from thought?
Weaponizing critique is awesome, by the way. I should just say Socrates is not the person you should be mentioning. It's Plato who who thought that philosophers should rule the world, and he was wrong about that. But this just builds on things that James and Joan have already said. I mean, the suspension of democracy in the name of democracy is the worst perversion that we have witnessed in the last 25 years of our... Well, it's true. And it keeps happening. And it keeps happening because of what Joan said. Words have power. If you identify yourself as a taxpayer or as a neighbor, that's one thing. If you say, I am a citizen, That is powerful language. I am a citizen of this country. I'm a citizen of this municipality. That is what we should be saying to ourselves. You don't have to be an Aristotelian about it. You don't have to say a good person is also a good citizen. But you do have to say, to be a good person means to think about what it means to be a good citizen. I can't believe that we have allowed this language to degrade in this country, but we have. So every one of us here, every one of us that we know, we must say to them, what does it mean to you to be a citizen? And you know what? It's not that intellectuals have any particular role in this. Socrates knew this. It's not that he thought he was special when he went around the agora of Athens and asked people questions and said, what do you think is the meaning of justice? He did that as a citizen, addressing his fellow citizens and saying to them, what is on your mind? There's no special role. There's no special authority about being an intellectual. This is a duty that we all have to each other. And I think the most depressing thing I see around me now, and not here, but, since we all, love each other here. But the most depressing thing I see around is this decline in the idea. I call it civility. I hasten always to say civility is not politeness. It's not etiquette. Civility is the duty that we owe to the other to take him or her seriously as a fellow citizen. That's what civility is. When I see you on the street, when I see you in a store, in a transaction, on the train today, and I see you and I say to myself, even subconsciously, even fleetingly, we're in this together. That's what it means. That's civility. So that's the role that any intellectual plays.
I'd like to switch gears for Jeremy. There's something that I noticed actually when I was thinking about this panel is that two of our speakers on this panel have actually share quite a strong affinity with the figure of Glenn Gould. In Crabwise to the Hounds, Jeremy Dodds' first book of poetry, an award winner, by the way, I might add, he features Glenn Gould poems that experiment with forms of musicality and rhythm. Mark Kingwell also spent a great deal of time with Glenn Gould, authoring a book in the Extraordinary Canadian series, which actually is the series that Vincent Lam has written, the Tommy Douglas book, on our reclusive Canadian piano virtuoso, which has a fractured approach, what you've called a musical biography. What I find fascinating in both of your cases is the way in which a Canadian musician inspires unorthodox, interdisciplinary responses, either in poetry or philosophy. Jeremy, what drew you to Glenn Gould when you sat down to look at his work?
I didn't know much about him. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. I can't hear myself. Okay. I didn't really know much about him as far as his personal life went. I was just listening to the music and getting a feel for him through that. And then I started to translate the music. It's sort of complicated, and I don't think it worked out in the end, but I was taking a bunch of Bristol board, had it in my room, so every time I'd slow the music down on the computer, there I am, I'd slow the music down on the computer, and then try to make like guitar tablature on the Bristol board. So, for instance, like during a certain phrasing that Gould would do, I would basically, thank you. I would make a mark on the Bristol board saying, okay, well maybe a noun here. Okay, maybe it's something I'm wearing. And I just basically try to translate the different phrasings and notes into English. And so I came up with this long sort of process that eventually evolved into a few poems. So I didn't actually, until I read Mark's book, I didn't really know a whole lot about Gould himself. So they're not autobiographical. They're not biographical poems, and they're just sort of experiments with sound and with metaphor. Obviously, you listen to some of Gould's work and you think of certain things. So I just allowed my, imagination to run wild with some of the metaphors, extended metaphors, that sort of thing. So that's my relationship with Gould.
Can I say something about this? Jeremy and I have never met until today. No, it's true. But we corresponded because his poems about Gould, in especially Crabwise to the Hounds, which is for sale downstairs,
That's
so
true.
inspired me when I was writing my book about Glenn Gould that I quoted them. And we, once upon a time, had a chance of doing a performance piece together. I wish we could do it now, but we can't. No, we can't.
Spontaneous improv.
You'll have to invite us back again. But I think it's amazing that even though we have many friends in common and many interests in common, obviously, we haven't met until 2 hours ago. 3.
Could I actually, I'm going to intervene right in there. And one of the things that I find really fascinating about the relationship of your work is that what Jeremy's doing is actually using technology in a really fascinating way to slow the music down and to use the markers and Bristol Bolden method that he just outlined. And Mark, you actually have a really fascinating reading of Gould, which is that gets buried between the mythology around his eccentricity, but you've pointed out actually technology had a lot to do with why Gould is the figure that he is.
Yeah, it's true. Last night in Toronto, I interviewed David Cronenberg on stage at the International Festival of Authors. And I put to him the question, which has been on my mind for many years, whether there is such a thing as a Toronto or maybe an Ontario school of technology thought. McLuhan, Innes, Fry, Gould, Cronenberg. And I do think it's true. And there is a kind of meditation on the way that body meets technology, the way media seep through our sense of ourselves as embodied as persons, which is really unique to this place and the last sort of 20 years or 25 years. And if you look at all the creative activity, the films of Cronenberg, the writings of McLuhan, the philosophy of various people, it's a remarkable achievement. I think going forward, people are going to look back on this and look at this cluster of thoughts, and I think Jeremy's in here, and it's really quite something that we're not transhumanists in a kind of straightforward way, but there's something really, really interesting about what's going on.
There's another really interesting affinity on our panel, and that is between Mark Kingwell and Joan Barfoot. Both speakers have spoken to the question of luck. And that question, Mark has called that in Canadians in many ways, and I'm going to eventually ask Jim this question as well, but there's a certain sense that we have a birthright lottery, and I think this is a phrase that Mark has used. It's a form of luck which in some ways should make us more aware of our advantages and privileges that we have in our society, and it should also give us time to make us aware that we have some in our society that have disadvantages. The same, in this case, bad luck, or the fact of things that happen that we could in some ways adjust for. Luck runs both ways, both for the advantage of some and the disadvantage of others. What role does luck have in being a writer and a thinker? I'll leave either one. Bad luck.
I wrote a whole novel called Luck because the idea of it really interested me because I feel like such a fortunate person. And I felt that not everyone understands that they haven't done their own bootstrapping and that they haven't become the fabulous middle-class people that we've all become all by ourselves in this incredibly fortunate, luxurious country in a pretty incredibly fortunate time. So, as I say, I wrote a novel. It's the only one, and I might talk about it more tomorrow.
Plug. Yeah.
Yes, that I actually started by just setting out the theme because it had occurred to me by that time, that was my 10th novel, that not everyone was catching the themes of my work. So I just spelled it out. But I think just demographically that we are, I'm guessing just about everybody in this room, are fortunate to be reasonably settled in the world, reasonably able to take care of ourselves. I personally think, what a lucky break that I was born when I was, grew up in the years I did, had the freedoms that I did, because in another country or in another time, my luck, I would have been SOL, really. My grandmother, my mother's mother, apparently was a suffragist. I didn't know her, she was dead before I was born. My mother was not so much because she didn't like her mother that much. I felt an affinity with my grandmother, whom I didn't know because of her political leanings, and I thought, I have inherited what she wanted, and I've had the blessing and the tremendous good luck of being able to be the person that I wanted to be, do almost exactly what I wanted to do to this point, because of those people and because of the time and the country in which I was born, and in fact the color and within the economy in which I was born. And I remember at the turn of the millennium, there was a TV panel, local TV, in which local experts were asked what was the best, greatest, most important invention of the 20th century now that we were moving into the 21st. Nobody said the birth control pill. And I said to myself and to the TV, oh my God, you missed the biggest invention of the century. That was freedom. Talk that, Mark.
I thought James was going to say something.
Oh, well, in some ways, what I was going to do to think through this question in the perspective of James's writing was the fact that we have in Canada, above the CNR rail line, a different Canada. It's a completely different conception of Canada. It's one in which Canadians sometimes don't recognize, and that is a lot of Aboriginal communities. You've spoken here in London, Ontario recently about the epidemic of suicides in places like Saskatchewan. What can we do as Canadians to alleviate or to recognize what's taking place in a different Canada?
Can I talk about luck?
What's
Can I
that?
talk about luck?
Yes, you certainly can. You certainly can talk about luck. Yes, yeah.
I would just like to pick up the point you said above the CNR line. I don't know what it's like above the CNR line. I thought that was North London. Everybody was rich. But absolutely, we live in a country in which there are 20,000 children who are homeless. There are tremendous a whole world out there in which the gap between those that have and those that don't have is growing. And in terms of the Aboriginal world, they're off the map. They're not even counted for statistical purposes. It's so bad, it would make us look bad internationally, I guess. But they have bad luck. Or I suppose we can call it, they have had the bad luck to be born into poverty and to be born into a group which is considered to be marginal and object of racism over the years. And so I don't really agree that we as a society are lucky. But when I grew up, when I was a kid, I thought I had very bad luck. We lived up by a dump. We moved to an old haunted house, no electricity, an outhouse in the back, coal oil lamps, people on both sides of the house committed suicide. It was sort of gothic. We were chased home every day, my brother and I, by kids saying, yeah, you dirty half-breed, you dirty Indians, what are you doing here? But then, that was really lucky because I was an outsider. And I think that outsiders do much better in general in Canadian society because you're not in a rut. You're not stuck think of the group around you, whether it's the Northern Irish, English, Scottish world, you can look at society in a sense like Jewish people in a sense, that they, being on the outside, you're able to be more objective as to what is going on. And I was able to turn all that bad luck into lessons, which were helpful me in life. And then, real luck, I was working for an American multimillionaire, chairman of the board of Pittsburgh Paint and Plate Glass, who told me when I was in grade 12 that he would fund my, and I didn't know him, except I polished his boats and I started his fires and I put ice in his glass of bourbon, but I was just the local help. And so with his funding, I went to London Central Collegiate, which was sort of bad luck. That's supposed to be a joke. But there were great teachers there. I went to the university. He paid the whole shot. That was wonderful luck. And then when I joined the Foreign Service, and after I joined, they told me, the personnel officer said, "You're lucky, Bartleman. You weren't on our original list, but somebody dropped out." So and I said, "Well, thank you very much for that boost to my self-esteem." And then years later, the Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, was looking for somebody who was an old hand at foreign policy who could have given him advice, but he didn't want anybody too smart. And so he picked me. And so that was my luck there. And so luck is sort of blind.
I would like to invite everybody to come downstairs to meet our authors. Our authors, if you're available, we have some tables set up for you to sign some books so that people can meet you in person. We really do invite you to come down and have a drink and stick around and talk. We have a great lineup for you tomorrow and Sunday of events for Words. This festival is for London, Ontario. It's for you. It's to celebrate what we do with words. It's to also celebrate people in Canada who can come here and talk about what they do with words. Please join me in thanking our panel of speakers for tomorrow.